Hello, my name is Max Jones. And before we get started, I want to tell you a little story. When I was a little boy, I would roll on the ground with my stuffed tiger. And my parents would watch the news. My dad would do his 1,000 crunches, my mom would make breakfast. And I'd say the only thing my dad was getting from the news that was very healthy was the 1,000 crunches he would do every morning. Because the news would put him into a bad or good mood. And it all depended upon the news of the day. And I found that interesting from a young age. And I wanted to know what this whole news thing was about. And years later, I realized that something as small as a bad news article or a bad story could dictate my dad's mood, well then was it doing on a national level? And I come to find out that news organizations would purport this thing called fake news. Now I didn't quite know what that was until the 2016 presidential election. And I was drawn to this by the president when he mentioned that certain news organizations put forth fake news. I didn't quite understand what that was. And then when coming up with the speech, I truly found out what it was. Fake news, as defined by Wikipedia, is news articles that are put forth that are fake, or fake news, quote unquote. And that is fascinating to me. Why would people put forward something that is fake or that is quote unquote the news of the day when it's not real? But it's not surprising, because today's day and age, we are thrown a lot of information, a lot like a buffet, except we're forced to be at the buffet rather than choosing. And we are just served with all this unfiltered information. As the Huffington Post said in 2012, a lot of raw information is thrown at us, and it's just left up to us to find what we want. And I don't think that's quite right. I don't think this throwing raw information at us is a correct way of doing news. We should go to news to be informed, not told what we should believe, as in some cases. And so in this speech, I want you to pay attention to my three main points. My first point being that the news, media outlets, and even social media puts forth opinions instead of facts. The second, I will discuss about how to be how to be an informed consumer. And my last point, how the news does not have to sway us, how we can go away from my parents' generation and be more happy with the news media that we consume. Point number one. The news, the public news outlets and social media puts forth a lot of information at us. And not all of it's necessarily healthy or good for us. As an article from the Hill newspaper said, more Americans about 90% of Americans get their news information from social media or even the news of the day. And a lot of the time, they are more like Dear Diary and entries than actual news. And I don't think that's quite right. Why should the news be about that specific reporter instead of it just being about the facts of the day? I mean, that's a big issue, and that feeds into what fake news is. And it goes on to the second point. Why should we let these twisted facts dictate our day and our judgment? I don't think that's quite right. Now, talking about the antithesis of the point, a lot of the news media organizations say that they're not fake news, that they do their fact checking, that they don't have any opinions in putting forth fake news. Now, the issue is that there's this concept in psychology called confirmation bias. And what it basically is that we all have natural biases, or we gravitate towards things that are familiar to us or that we agree with. I mean, that's a pretty normal part of life, but it's not productive when you bring it to a national level. And people say, well, this is bad. Well, that's your opinion. And why should the news put forth their opinions and then squash other people's? And America has come to a point where they love censorship more than they love the facts of the news of the day. And that's a big issue. So now that we've talked about the problem a little bit, we're going to move on to our second point. Being an informed consumer. Now, to briefly go over, C. John Somerville said, "The death of wisdom is an informed society." Close quote. And I think that's a very true statement. When we stop talking, when we stop being informed, a lot of issues come about in our day-to-day workings. If I'm not informed on how something is, and I start having a conversation with somebody, and they're like, "That's not how it is," and then we're not able to have a conversation because we get into an argument instead. Being an informed consumer is all about going to both sides of the argument and talking to people, discussing what we need to do to progress it. And that's a big part of being informed, is going to different people. It's not letting the confirmation bias beat us. Now, a lot of the time, confirmation bias, we don't really detect it. But the ways we can stop it is if we can go to different parts, like going to a page that we agree with, but then going to some source, like for instance, me, it would be CNN. Or talking to a person who doesn't share the same political beliefs as me. But getting their opinion, staying informed, is really important. And that's the whole point of being an informed consumer. Now, in conclusion, the Pew Research Center said that only 36% of American adults are politically informed. Now that's like a holy cow statistic, because that means not a lot of people are being well informed. Not a lot of people are actually talking about what's going on, and they're going in political ignorance, and these are dangerous ages for that to be occurring. But there's a lot of, and leading to the last thing I want to talk about. I know that as you are an informed consumer and you do the three things of reading about both sides of an issue, talking to other people, keeping the discussion going, and thirdly, reading different material that you might not agree with. I know that as you do those three things, you're going to be an informed consumer, and you're going to be a better American because of it. And you can be apart from the 62% of American adults that that get their information solely from social media and solely from the news, as cited from Real Solutions. I know that as you do these things, you will improve your life and you'll be happier and you won't be pulled into the negative society that America is starting to create because of this fake news. And right now, I want to encourage you to go to change.org to sign up with a petition to stop Facebook spreading fake news articles. Now, this is I didn't discuss this too much in my speech, but Facebook puts forth some fake news articles, and by joining the petition, we can try to, as American people, stop fake news from coming onto our Facebook feeds. And I want to end my speech by thanking everyone for listening to me, and I hope you have a better day, and more importantly, you are more convinced that fake news is a really big issue. Thank you so much.